Καλησπέρα σας. Σας ευχαριστούμε που μείνατε σε αυτή τη συζήτηση. Δεν σας κρύβω ότι και εγώ θα έμενα στη θέση σας. Όχι για μένα, προφανώς. So that was dense, I would say. And I was like overhearing people's discussions last night after the performance, trying to figure out what they were saying. And they were analyzing what was that all about. People were saying, I liked it, I couldn't breathe, my heart was beating fast, but what was that all about? There was no plot. Was it pedophilia, this secret desire? What was it? So, what was it all about?
Well, I mean, I think Bernard-Marie Coltès would say it was about a dealer and a client, and trying to ascertain if this client shows up at a certain place at a certain hour, trying to ascertain what it is that he wants, assuming that he wants something. And even if he didn't want something, the dealer would try to sell him something that he might want. So that's what I think it's about. Obviously, this production is probably quite different to the original in a catholicity of ways, I'm sure. But that's what I would say the original piece was about. So it's about, as the dealer says, Inge's character says, she's not here to satisfy people, she's here to pleasure people, she's here to fill the abyss of desire, which is probably quite a different and larger order to fill.
What do you think, Ingeborga?
I agree.
I knew you would say that.
Well, it is about also about forbidden desires.
Of course.
So it's about something a person does not allow oneself to even admit that he's got. But probably he's got, so he's fighting with it. It's about inner struggle.
Do you see yourselves as actors on this stage as sellers of a desire that comes to be fulfilled?
Well, as an actor, I use the metaphor of being a surfer, meaning it isn't really about me, it isn't about Inge, it's not about us or our relationship. I compare it to surfing because, in this case, at the Onassis Center, you get on your board, you paddle out at 8:30 p.m., and tomorrow at 2, you turn your back to the sun and you wait for the wave. And what is the wave? We're not the wave. The wave is the collision between the material and the public. That's what creates the wave. And we just ride it. So that's, I think, what we do. And that's kind of as simply as I could ever
So you
say.
are actually on the border between the seller and the buyer. You are in this margin. But this particular margin between the need and the articulated demand is exactly where desire lives, in this no man's land. So in that sense, theater is a weapon. Is theater a weapon?
Yeah, probably. If it's good. If it's not very good, it's a torture. If it's good, it's a weapon, or certainly can be.
Sometimes we want to be tortured by theater.
Yeah, but not
in a bad
not
way.
by a bad thing. Just one is enough for a lifetime, I think. And I've done a number. So.
Is language a weapon?
Sure.
And in your case, because you actually speak your native language and you are not, do you feel that you're sharing a common ground where you both meet when you're speaking in English, both of you?
No, John speaks Russian to me, or Lithuanian, or French. No, we do speak English to each other, I think. Mm-hmm. Do we?
Yeah. Inge and I have worked together over 30 years. This is our, I don't know, 9th or 10th project or so. And so we're quite attuned to the way each other works. And also Inge's, I think, very gifted in her understanding and attention to language. In this case, English, but I'm quite sure it's the same in Lithuanian or Russian.
Actually, that's exactly where I was getting at. You've known each other for 30 years. This is quite a long friendship, I would say. Mm-hmm. So how did you manage to work on that piece, and why that piece? Was it just about finding a piece for two people? And in which context did this collaboration take place?
Okay. Well, we were going to do something else together. Then it didn't work out, and we were actually looking for something simple. And kind of like, two of us with a piano,
but
maybe.
In 30 years, we've never found it.
And like two of us, a piano, or maybe, something.
Easy.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking to Roman Dolzhansky, who is a dramaturg of this piece. And I said, well, maybe you know something, because he knows everything. So maybe you know something. And he gave me this play. And he said, actually, Timofey Kulabin, with whom I just opened the show, wants to do it. And I read it. And Timofey says, do you know what it is about? And I go, I have no clue. And then I sent the play to John, and I said, what do you think? And kind of bit by bit, we said, well, it's pandemic, it's quarantine, let's have a look, let's have a Zoom. Of course, and then we read it on the Zoom, and then we got into it. And then it seduced us. So, and then eventually we were talking on Zoom, and then Timofey says, well, I've got the design and the calculations and everything of design. And we kind of looked, and it was already a show, complicated. So that's a simple piece that
we'll find. So.
Did you analyze at all the fact that originally it was a piece for two men? Does it matter?
No, I don't think so. Because he mentions something in the piece that he says that facing you, I'm like someone facing men dressed as women disguised as men. In the end, it's impossible to know what sex we're talking about, which strikes me as very prescient given our present society. So it's not something I ever worried about too much. I mean, they've done it for centuries, so it's not as new as people might think, I fear.
Yeah, I don't think anybody thought of the fact whether you're a woman and they're used to that piece, with two men, but who can be used to that piece? And it's interesting that I think it's the first time that I see so many people holding the book in the theater. Uh-huh. And it's the first time that so many people ask me for the text. And I think that I have a Roman, this amazing dramaturg in mind, who is talking about this melancholic piece, but not dark. Even Coltes himself would say that he's not dark, he's desperate, he's beyond darkness. So it is a melancholic piece, but you manage to make it democratic. I don't think that many people would be able actually to read that book, even in the Greek translation by Δημήτρης Δημητριάδης, εκδόσεις Άγρα, μπορείτε να το βρείτε. I'm just explaining where this can be found. But being staged, you open up something so introvert, which is exactly what desire is. How did you feel when you read the text?
Well, I would say, I mean, maybe you should. I mean, I would just say that the more we worked on it, the more we thought it was promising. But Timofey is a very, very strong director and has absolutely clear ideas about what he wanted it to be for each separate beat of the play and for the play visually and in its entirety in terms of meaning and in a way even plot. I don't think there are things like the chalkboard and the man and the snow and the shoe. All of these things are Timofey's, in Timofey's concept. So I kind of always let the play and the director decide the meaning. I just kind of follow along. And I would never really like to decide that as an actor unless it was really desperate.
I know that I feel the need to ask you something that is actually related to something local, but I'm afraid it's also global. These days, Greek actors are actually going on strikes.
Yeah, I heard.
You've heard about it. And quite rightfully so, I would say. And artists in general, and still I'm afraid it's not just a local phenomenon, are not appreciated as professionals. It's as if it's not a job. It's as if somebody is doing his or her passion, and it's good that there are such passionate people out there so that us, the audience, can have a more interesting life. Mm-hmm. So you have to be punished by not being recognized, respected, or even paid in the right manner. So I'm wondering, why do you think, let's say, society does not see this very practical side of this job, which is not just let's express our passion and something we cannot avoid?
Sure, I couldn't answer why people do think that way, or the ones who don't think that way, but most of it is just work, meaning you generally make enormous preparations and you work constantly. And unless you're in the less than 1% who become famous, you'll always pretty much be undervalued, and those who become famous always way overvalued and overpaid. And such is, I mean, you know, what was that, the film that Peter Greenaway made about the traveling, is it Globus? The traveling company in, I think, who were in Holland. That was a film with a high sort of content of sexual things. which I read the script, which was terrific, and I liked the film very much. But at that, they were prostitutes at a time. And without saying some still are, it remains a kind of mystery work, as if there wasn't any, but in fact, you do quite a bit of work. And Inga and I work constantly and will never stop. This is why I love to work with Ingeborga, because if I'm doing something difficult, she's the person I want next to me. And if I'm doing something that might fail or that I am rather certain.
Maybe we should do something simple next.
Yeah, maybe we should. And even popular. But that's because we like the work. And I think the vast majority of actors I know, sure, they'd rather not have money troubles and they'd rather have more work or they'd rather have better work, of course. But most of them just enjoy the work. And I do believe there is a price in life for getting to do what you want. That may not be pleasant, but I think it's the case with actors, and then it's up to each actor to decide what is that price. And in this case, I think they decided no.
Coming from a different cultural background, do you think that artists are perceived as people who have a normal job or a job?
Well, I think, you see, I can only talk about myself.
Of course.
I look at it as a job. I learn my lines, which, you know, there are quite a few, and we repeat them, like John said, and I think it is a profession, because, you know, people think they can, and some do, some are able just to come into the shot and be very, you know, in film, or they can shoot a video for TikTok, great. But actually to come on stage and do a show, you need a profession. It's not that easy. Meaning for the person who is not prepared.
I'm going back to the particular play or text or book. Coltès himself said that what he had in mind was actually having two people, a punk singer and a blues singer, starring. And the bridge between them is actually the diplomacy that derives from the language itself. So I don't know, it would be like Jello Biafra and B.B. King. I don't know. And I was wondering why he sees this kind of distance between these two when we can see that these two cannot be without each other. And many people, even last night, they were saying that it's only one person who is dealing with his or her subconscious, and even the cover of the book in Greece, there's only one man and his shadow. So do you think it's two people, one person? There's a punk singer and a blues singer, regardless of what Coltès himself had in mind.
Yeah, well, I often find, once I did I was one of the producers of a film which had I thought a terrific and very, very upsetting script. And we had a reading of it in Los Angeles with a group of actors who weren't in the film, but who read very well. And at the end of the script, people said what they had to say about it. And I said to the writer of it, the novelist, after he said what he thought, I said, I know you wrote this, but have you read it? because he didn't seem to have the slightest idea, in utter seriousness, of its of certain elements that were at the very least inescapably, irretrievably obvious, even if they remained in some subconscious way. So I think, depending on how writers write, Harold Pinter, for instance, I'm not sure how much Harold thought about what he wrote. He wrote it. Beckett. Not that they weren't superb wordsmiths or great writers or etc. I remember once I directed many plays of Harold Pinter's, and once at dinner I mentioned something about his play called No Man's Land. And I don't think I ever had anyone look at me that astonished by the kind of outrageousness of an idea, but actually I thought he hadn't thought about it. That's not what you do when you're writing. That's what you do when you're reading. And I actually think, like directing and acting, those are two different skills, two different, they require kind of two different parts of one's brain, and one is giving out and one is receiving, and those are very different. You know, it's kind of like electricity. There's a male plug and a female plug, and they're not the same, and I wouldn't expect them to be, really. So I wouldn't necessarily trust what Coltès says. And in every production, that play is being interpreted principally by the director, and then by the designer, the cast, everything. So
I guess the good thing with Coltès is that he doesn't want to be trusted.
no.
And even himself, after what he said about the punk singer and the blues singer, he said that he had in mind this Jim Jarmusch movie with Tom Waits and John Lurie
Sure.
being in a ring and fighting, and then they would just stop if necessary and say, okay, let's become friends and let's forget about it. Let's be together. Well, which phrase really sticks to your mind from that particular play? Which phrase comes back again and again, or even right this moment?
From the play?
Yeah.
I'm afraid because a man dies first before he looks for his death.
Mm.
Like, if you know, or that's all it is.
I think that's a very curious one, because that's absolutely inarguable. We view it as terrible because, at least if we're lucky, we view life as at least partially beautiful, or that beauty is achievable. But I always think of things like, this life matters, that life matters. No, it doesn't. The sun's going to burn out eventually.
Ingeborga knows something about it. We actually got to meet you through the film that was talking about a sun burning.
Exactly. But it's important to us, and maybe that's pathetic, I don't know. But I don't know of another way to live than to care about what I put out in the world and the people around me and my colleagues. I don't know another way.
You created this film called 100 Years, not of solitude, that will be seen in 2115, I suppose. You locked it in a vault. What were you thinking? That you want to leave something behind, or exactly the opposite, that you don't care, so let's create something and I will not be here when it's being seen?
That's a good question. Actually, it was a commercial project. It was brought to me, I think it was Fred and Farid, a PR group in France. It was for the family whom I happen to know a little, and their daughter especially, who own Rémy Martin.
Okay.
And it was for they wanted an idea to publicize their cognac, which is called Louis XIII, Louis XIII, which takes 100 years to make. And they asked Robert Rodriguez and myself to work on it, and they said they would write the text, and we kind of said, we should probably do that. I mean, we get the idea, but we kind of need to do that. And so for me, it was both a kind of tiny chapter from a Book of the Dead, and that's fine by me, whether it's tonight or in 2 weeks or in 5 years, I don't know. So what? So I didn't, the part I addressed was more about, I wonder what it will be in 100 years. I really, if these past couple of years are any indication, it's not promising. But I hope that's not the case. But so that was my curiosity, and I think Robert's too. And it's only, whatever, 90-some years before it plays.
You'll be here, I suppose. We're not in a hurry, so I want to stay here just to watch that film. But there's this phrase that talks about this man who crosses by plane the Atlantic. And can we say that he's in Greenland when he's flying over Greenland? And it somehow got related to this sense of the floating elevator. And even life itself, we are always somewhere in between, something before and after, or none of that. So I'm wondering, when you're on a stage, on that stage, performing this play tonight, are you in Athens?
No.
Yeah. Are you somewhere?
In the story.
Yeah. So in an elevator.
It doesn't really matter where we are. I mean, Inga and I performed more or less all over the world. But no, not really. Our obligation, our duty, our job, our profession is to be where we're supposed to be in the play.
So in the moment, rather than to be present.
Yeah.
Is a jacket enough to give to a person in order to fulfill a desire?
Well, I think the jacket probably means a lot of things. There's the constant repetition of a number of phrases. One of them being bend over, not surprisingly.
Also, jacket is not only passion, it's probably trust.
Trousers is trust.
Compassion.
But jacket is safe. Jacket is safe.
Yeah, as we say, you can always give the jacket, but you should hesitate before giving shoes, or you should never ever give your trousers.
In that case, I'm not giving my jacket, but I will definitely give the mic to the audience. So if we can have like the lights a bit lit up. Είναι η σειρά σας για ερωτήσεις. We caught you by surprise. That's interesting.
They're sleeping.
No. But they're very silent. The audience is very silent in that play, and I love that. So who is going first? Ooh. It always takes some time for the first hand to rise. Εδώ. Ναι. Εδώ.
Okay, now everyone can hear me. Let me thank you on behalf of everyone here for the performance. And the use of the video was amazing, was stunning. And I was never sure where to look and how to kind of handle that. But for actors, I was thinking about whether, are you performing for the camera? Or are you performing for the audience?
We perform in a way for each other. We perform for each other in a way. The camera, I don't care, or meaning that's great, or the public is great, but we focus really on listening to each other. It's Timothy who decides what we're doing at a particular time. In terms of, are we looking in the camera? Are we turned away from the camera? Is it a wide shot or a close-up? And what is the movement? But it doesn't matter much to me, do you?
No, we just, we don't see that film you see. No, and I don't think we ever saw it, unless we need to remember something. But, I think actor thinks, well, it's very difficult to watch a show from outside, from your point, because what we see in the show is what is a completely different thing. And that's how you remember your journey within the show. So it's not like they're separate bits, but you go from there and there and there. And if you constructed it well, which sometimes happens, then one thought leads to another. And actually, it's the action that leads you. Mm-hmm. But camera just happens to be there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε. Παρακαλώ. Είναι πίσω σας ο κύριος Βουδικλάρης, νομίζω. Ναι.
Actually, somebody gave me a very interesting explanation what cinema, film, how film is different from the theater. And I kind of agree, because when you're on stage, you talk to your partner, but your energy is actually voice has to get to the very last row. Mm-hmm. And that's how your energy goes. It has to be wide. Whilst in a film, your energy is with your partner and you allow the camera to watch you. Mm-hmm. And that's very different. Mm-hmm.
Good evening.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. It's probably a question we should ask the director, but since you're here, from the way I saw it staged tonight, it seemed like this whole dialogue is an interlude shortly before a man committing suicide. So this could be a last attempt for him to stay alive.
I think that's fair. Mm-hmm.
Great observation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say, knowing Mr. Voudiklaris, he's a music man. So, and this piece is definitely like a music score. So it's like having two people singing their arias all the time. There isn't a plot, per se. So it's a constant comment towards suicide or even cleansing, because you enter a shower. I don't know if a shower is enough, but thank God it's not, because I think it's good to carry our sins and desires. Άλλη ερώτηση? Παρακαλώ.
Thank you for the wonderful performance. Okay, what would you like to be in your real life? The dealer or the customer, and why?
If it's a choice.
What would you... I think customer. Selling is
very difficult.
a lot of energy.
Yeah, especially if, you know, the buyer doesn't tell you what he wants.
Yeah. Mm. If he came in and said, listen, I like that rug, okay, but you know, that's a lot of effort, I think.
Μία τελευταία ερώτηση, οπότε όποιος αυτοσυγκρατείται ας μην το κάνει. Εκεί πάνω. Ο κύριος.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much. It was amazing. Some 14 years ago, I was at a masterclass Mr. Malkovich gave at Thessaloniki, and I asked him there if he has ever doubted himself while doing a movie. And he answered that movies are my way of making money to do what I love, which is theater. So I've even doubted myself while reading the script. So seeing you here tonight, I understand that, but I have to ask you, how, for both of you, how do you choose the plays you want in your repertoire, let's say? And because you said that it's not the actor's play, it's the director's play. If you've read the script, the play, and you loved it and you saw it in one way, and the director wants to drive you in another way, how do you handle that?
For me, I do both. I direct and act, so I just simply don't act in plays that I would like to direct. And I don't direct plays I'd like to act in. It's not the same job, it's a different planet, so I just don't have that conflict. And you know, when you do movies and plays, these are entirely different worlds. There's a lot I like about making movies. Is there anything I prefer to the process? Maybe a few things, but because that's not where I grew up or grew up working. I mean, I was 29 years old before I made my first movie. I'd already been acting for years without any dreams of being in movies. So to me, they're completely different forms, but I imagine if one was a musician and you played the saxophone and the piano, why would you care? I mean, it's music. So that's kind of how I regard it. I don't know.
Well, if in this case, I have to say Timofey Kulyabin was always ahead of me, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. He saw the play, he knew it inside out, he knows our performances inside out, he knows every word, because he's seen it millions of times. He works extremely precisely. Nothing escapes his attention.
Gaze.
Nothing. And it's kind of would be silly of me not to go with his expertise and his devotion and his talent.
He'll always give us notes every time he sees a.
So, and I think it's the trust. If you trust the director, it's the most precious gift you can have doing a play.
Sure.
Because then you are free. Because it means he trusts you or she trusts you and you trust him. And you don't question yourself. Is he talented, not talented? It doesn't matter. Just go.
So, as Cortez would say, that's all it is. That's all it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.